The silence is the first sign that something is wrong. In the heart of West Africa, a rainforest that should be alive with sound is dead quiet. For the researchers of the Thai Forest Project, this silence is more terrifying than any scream. For weeks, they have been tracking the remnants of a fallen empire. A kingdom not of men, but of chimpanzees. A community so vast, so intelligent, it was considered one of the great wonders of the primate world. Now, it is a ghost town. The air, usually thick with the scent of damp earth and vegetation, carries a new smell. The smell of decay. We follow a lone figure moving through the undergrowth. Not a researcher, but one of the last survivors. A young male, whom the scientists call Kosi. His eyes, wide with a trauma we can barely comprehend, scan the empty canopy. There are no pant hoots of greeting. No calls of reassurance. Only the rustle of his own passage through the leaves. Just 3 months ago, Kosi was part of a thriving metropolis of over 150 chimpanzees. A super community that dominated this forest for generations. They hunted together, fought together, raised their young together. They had a culture, a history, passed down from one to the next. Then, the enemy arrived. It had no face, no sound. It was carried on the wind, in the soil, in the very touch of a trusted ally. It was a plague, an invisible massacre that swept through the population with horrifying speed, leaving devastation in its wake. This is not a story of warfare, of tooth and claw. It is the story of a biological apocalypse. Of a society brought to its knees by a microscopic killer. And of what happened after. When the rules that held a civilization together were erased by death, what did the survivors do to stay alive? In the ruins of their world, surrounded by the ghosts of their family, the 7 remaining chimpanzees would engage in acts of desperation so profound, so shocking, they would force us to rewrite everything we thought we knew about the line that separates them from us. This is the documented account of the fall of the Koro chimpanzee empire, and the terrifying new world that rose from its ashes. To understand the depth of the tragedy, we must first understand the height of the achievement. Before the fall, the Koro community of chimpanzees in the Thai National Park was a marvel of the natural world. This was no mere collection of apes. This was a nation. Their territory, carved out over decades of conflict and cooperation, spanned more than 50 square kilometers of dense, primary rainforest. It was a land of plenty, rich with fig trees, nut groves, and prime hunting grounds. At its heart was a social structure of breathtaking complexity. The community was led by an alpha male named Solomon by the long-term research team from the Max Planck Institute. He was a magnificent brute in his prime, a veteran of countless border wars. But it was his political acumen, not just his strength, that held this vast group together. He maintained a coalition of powerful lieutenants, skillfully navigating the intricate web of alliances and rivalries that defined their society. Solomon was the law. His word, enforced by his allies, settled disputes and organized the formidable patrols that kept their borders secure. But power here was not held by males alone. The true wisdom of the Koro community resided in its elder females, like the matriarch known as Hawa. Over her 40 years, she had accumulated a library of knowledge in her mind. She knew the location of every fruit tree, the timing of every season. She was a master of their most advanced technology, the complex art of nut cracking, using carefully selected stone and wooden hammers to access the rich kernels inside. This was not instinct, it was learned behavior. A culture passed from mother to offspring. We see it in archival footage from the research team, Hawa patiently demonstrating the technique to a clumsy juvenile, correcting its grip, showing it the precise angle to strike. This was their version of a classroom. Daily life was a symphony of social interaction. The forest would ring with their calls, a complex language of pant hoots, grunts, and screams that communicated everything from location to excitement to danger. Groups would fission and fuse throughout the day. A hunting party of a dozen males would silently track colobus monkeys in the canopy, while 30 or more individuals would gather at a giant fig tree, a noisy, chaotic social event of feeding, grooming, and political maneuvering. The bonds were tangible. Grooming was their social glue, a currency of trust and affection, reinforcing alliances, calming nerves after a conflict. To watch them was to watch a society in full, vibrant function. They were intelligent, strategic, and profoundly social. They were, by every measure, a success story of evolution. And they had no idea they were living in their final days. The beginning of the end was quiet. Indistinguishable from any other death in the jungle. A young female, barely an adult, was found by a research assistant at the base of a sleeping nest. There were no marks of a leopard attack, no signs of a fall. Her death was a mystery, logged in the field notes as an anomaly. In a community this large, sudden death was not unheard of. But a week later, another body was found. An adolescent male, miles away from the first. Again, no cause of death could be determined. A strange lethargy had been noted in his final days. He had refused to travel, his eyes dull. His mother had stayed by his side, grooming him, trying to coax him to eat, utterly unaware that her touch, meant as comfort, was a vector for the disease. The pathogen, later identified as a virulent strain of anthrax bacteria living dormant in the soil, was spreading silently. It was an enemy the chimpanzees could not comprehend. Their social nature, their greatest strength, was now their greatest vulnerability. Every grooming session, every shared piece of fruit, every nose-to-nose greeting became a potential death sentence. The first behavioral shifts were subtle, almost imperceptible. A regular border patrol was half-hearted, some of its key members too listless to participate. A cooperative monkey hunt, usually a display of lethal precision, fell apart in disorganized chaos. Solomon, the alpha, grew agitated. He could sense the wrongness in his community. He responded the only way he knew how, with displays of dominance. He would charge through the group, hair on end, trying to rally his followers, to impose order on a world that was quietly slipping into chaos. But his power displays had no effect. How do you intimidate a microbe? How do you fight an enemy that sickens you from the inside out? The researchers watched, their concern turning to alarm. Their field notes from this period are filled with confusion and a growing sense of dread. They documented chimps shivering with fever, huddling for warmth in the tropical heat. They saw individuals become disoriented, wandering away from the group. The community's reaction was one of profound confusion. They would gather around the sick, touching them, grooming them, seemingly trying to understand what was wrong. It was an act of compassion that was accelerating their doom. The vibrant sounds of the Koro community began to change. The confident pant hoots that echoed for miles were replaced by more uncertain calls. There was a new sound entering their vocabulary, the hoarse, racking cough of diseased lungs. The invisible threat was tightening its grip, and the pillars of this great society were beginning to tremble. The subtle decline then became a catastrophic collapse. The period the researchers would later call the Great Dying began. The death toll went from 1 or 2 a week to 3 or 4 a day. The forest floor became a graveyard. The splinter groups, once temporary foraging parties, became permanent, terrified clusters of survivors hiding from a threat they could not see. The social contract of the Koro chimpanzees, built over generations, was dissolving in a matter of weeks. The breaking point, the moment from which there was no return, came with the death of the matriarch, Hawa. She who held the collective memory of the group, she who knew the ancient paths and the secret sources of water. She was found near her favorite nut-cracking grove, her well-worn hammer stone still beside her. Her death was not just the loss of an individual, it was the burning of a library. The crucial knowledge of survival, of tool use, of navigating their vast territory, died with her and the other elders who were succumbing around her. Without their guidance, the younger generations were lost. But the final, devastating blow was yet to come. The invisible enemy did not respect rank or power. It came for the king. Solomon, the great alpha who had ruled for a decade, fell ill. His decline was shockingly swift. The mighty male, whose physical presence had been the bedrock of their society, was reduced to a weak, shivering figure. His coalition of allies, themselves sick or dying, fell apart. The political order they had maintained vanished. In his final hours, he lay on the forest floor, and for the first time in years, no one came to offer submission or seek favor. They were too sick, too scared. His death created a power vacuum on a scale the community had never experienced. There was no challenger strong enough to take his place, no clear successor. There was only chaos. The community shattered. Large groups of 30 or 40 became terrified bands of 5 or 6, and then isolated, frantic individuals. The researchers, now working under strict quarantine protocols, could only document the horror. Dr. R.S. Thorne, the project lead, recorded a harrowing audio diary. "We are witnessing the complete disintegration of a society. The complex network of relationships, the alliances, the rivalries, it's all gone. They are no longer the Koro community. They are just dying animals. The forest is falling silent. The pant hoots have stopped. I don't know how many are left. I don't know if any will survive. The kingdom had fallen. The civilization had ceased to exist. All that was left was a desperate, primal fear and the instinct to survive, no matter the cost. In the final stage of the collapse, the conflict was not one of territory or dominance. It was a war waged by each individual against an unseen enemy, and against the terrifying loneliness of a world emptied of its people. We follow the young male, Kosi. He is perhaps 10 years old, just reaching adolescence. He had been on the cusp of entering the complex political world of the adult males. Now, that world is gone. He is healthy, one of the lucky few with a natural resistance. But his immunity is a curse as much as a blessing. It forces him to be a witness. He watched his own mother grow weak, her familiar scent changing to the acrid smell of sickness. He stayed with her, confused, trying to groom her until she finally stopped breathing. He remained by her body for a full day, a behavior of mourning documented in chimps, before the instinct for survival forced him to move on. He wanders the territory that was once his home. It is now an alien landscape, haunted by memories. He passes the great fig tree where dozens would gather, it is empty. He stumbles upon the clearing where Solomon used to hold court, it is silent. The forest is littered with the dead, their bodies decomposing quickly in the jungle heat. The researchers, moving with grim purpose, document each one, trying to piece together the final moments. But the true conflict, the one that would define the future, was brewing among the living. The pathogen had not just killed chimpanzees, it had killed their society. The unwritten laws that governed them, cooperation, sharing, respecting hierarchy, had died with the majority. Among the scattered survivors, a new, brutal logic was taking hold. The tipping point is recorded in a researcher's field notes, a moment of profound significance. 2 adult males, both survivors, both desperately hungry, simultaneously discover a small cluster of ripe fruit. In the old world, the more dominant male would have claimed it, the other submitting, perhaps begging for a share. There would have been a ritual, a system. But now, there is nothing. No hierarchy. No rules. They look at each other, and for the first time, there is no recognition of a shared society in their eyes. There is only the cold calculus of hunger. The fight is sudden, explosive, and ugly. It is not a ritualized display for status. It is a desperate, violent scramble for calories. They bite and tear at each other, screaming with a raw fury. The winner, bleeding from several wounds, takes the fruit and flees, not even finishing it there, but scrambling high into a tree to eat it in paranoid isolation. The loser limps away, defeated. This was the first battle of the New World. It signaled the end of the Koro way of life. The survivors were no longer members of a community. They were competitors. The conflict was now against each other. Every rustle in the undergrowth could be a rival. Every source of food was a potential battlefield. Their complex cognitive abilities, once used for political maneuvering and cooperative hunting, were now refocused on a singular, selfish goal: individual survival, at any and all costs. When the last victim of the plague succumbed, the forest fell into a new kind of silence. The silence of the aftermath. The researchers did a final, harrowing census. Of the 152 members of the once mighty Koro community, only 7 remained. 7 traumatized individuals, adrift in the ruins of their civilization. The Koro 7, as they became known, were a random assortment of survivors. There was Kosi, the adolescent witness. 2 other unrelated adult males, Brutus and Flynn, who now viewed each other as mortal enemies. 3 adult females, 2 of whom were childless, and 1, named Asha, who desperately clutched her single, terrified infant. Their behavior was a ghost of what it had been. They were now socially broken. The intricate grooming networks were gone. They actively avoided each other. A chance encounter in the forest would lead not to a greeting, but to a tense standoff, often ending with one party fleeing. They had become solitary creatures in a species defined by its sociability. The most devastating consequence was the loss of their culture. The Koro community was famous for its sophisticated tool use, especially for hunting and gathering. But these were learned skills, passed down through observation and practice. With the elders and specialists all dead, the knowledge was gone. The researchers watched as the survivors tried, and failed, to crack the hardest, most nutritious nuts. They lacked the proper technique, the knowledge of which stones to use as hammers and which to use as anvils. A critical food source, once a staple of their diet, was now locked away from them. Their world had shrunk. Their diet became simpler, less nutritious. Their complex, coordinated hunts for monkeys were an impossibility. That required teamwork, trust, and strategy, three concepts that no longer existed. In this new world of scarcity and fear, the ultimate taboo was broken. Ash's infant, already weak from malnutrition, died. In the days before, the community would have engaged in a communal display of grief. The mother might carry the body for days. But now, something else happened. Something documented only a handful of times in the history of primatology. Brutus, the larger of the two adult males, ambushed Asha, stole the body of her dead infant, and began to eat it. It was an act of cannibalism born not of malice, but of extreme, desperate hunger. It was the final, horrifying proof that the society was gone. The Koro chimpanzees, who once stood as a testament to the heights of non-human intelligence and culture, had been reduced to their most primal, individualistic core. They were no longer a community. They were just survivors. The fall of the Koro Empire was a tragedy, but for the scientists who documented it, it was also a unique, if horrific, opportunity. It provided a glimpse into what happens when a complex animal society collapses. The pathogen was identified as Bacillus anthracis, the bacterium that causes anthrax. It exists naturally in the soil of Tai National Park and can lie dormant for decades. For reasons not fully understood, perhaps linked to unusual dry seasons concentrating the spores, an outbreak can occur, and for a species as susceptible as chimpanzees, the results are catastrophic. This event provided chilling evidence for a theory primatologists had long considered, that the greatest strength of highly social, intelligent animals is also their Achilles heel. Their dense social networks, essential for defense, cooperative foraging, and raising young, are also superhighways for disease transmission. Dr. Christoph Bosch and his team at the Max Planck Institute have studied the tide chimps for over 4 decades, and this event profoundly challenged their understanding. It demonstrated that chimpanzee culture is not just a fascinating quirk, it is a fragile, essential component of their survival. The loss of tool use techniques was not a minor setback. It was a devastating blow to their ability to extract calories from their environment. It proved that these behaviors are not hardwired instincts, but a body of knowledge as precarious as any human tradition. This social collapse mirrors some of the darkest chapters in human history. During the Black Death in the 14th century, European society partially disintegrated. Social norms were abandoned, and fear drove people to extreme behaviors. The Koro 7 showed that this is not a uniquely human response to an apocalypse. When the structures of society are removed, the raw drive for individual survival takes over, regardless of species. The event underscored a critical point about conservation. Protecting a species is not just about protecting individuals or their habitat. It is also about protecting their culture. For long-lived, intelligent animals like chimpanzees, elephants, and whales, a catastrophic die-off can wipe out generations of accumulated knowledge, leaving the survivors handicapped and vulnerable, even if the environment recovers. The legacy of the Koro community is a stark warning. The very complexity that we admire, that makes them seem so much like us, also makes them profoundly fragile. In the years that followed the Great Dying, the forest remained quiet. The Koro 7 did not rally. They did not form the nucleus of a new community. Their trauma was too deep, the social fabric too shredded to be rewoven. Brutus and Flynn, the two rival males, continued their hostile existence until, one day, Flynn's body was found, the result of a violent conflict. Brutus reigned for a short time as the solitary, paranoid king of an empty kingdom, before disappearing himself. The females faded back into the forest, their fates unknown. And what of Kosi, the young male who watched his entire world vanish? He was tracked by the researchers for another 5 years. He never integrated with any other group. He became a wanderer, a solitary figure moving through the vast territory that once belonged to his family. He was a ghost in his own home, surrounded by the echoes of a life that was gone. He carried the memory of a lost world in his mind, a culture and a society that now existed only within him. The story of the Koro chimpanzees is a profound and unsettling testament to the fragility of life. It reveals that even for our closest living relatives, society is a delicate construction, vulnerable to forces beyond its control. Their empire wasn't conquered by a rival group, it was erased by an invisible enemy, a reminder that in the grand drama of nature, the most powerful force is often the one you cannot see. Today, the Thai forest continues to live. Other chimpanzee groups from other territories have slowly begun to explore the edges of the Koro's former range. Perhaps, in generations to come, a new community will rise here. But the unique culture of the Koro, their specific traditions, their history, is gone forever. It serves as a haunting reminder that a civilization, whether of apes or of men, can vanish in the blink of an eye, leaving behind only silence and the question of what was lost. For more investigations into the epic and often brutal realities of the natural world, subscribe to our channel and join us on the next journey.